Weight is a protective mechanism your body's hanging on because she doesn't feel safe. And so what we have to really start understanding is, what is it about? Because you could completely change the way that you eat. You can stop binge eating and still not see it shift. And it could be nothing to do with anything physical. I've had women who it's their inner child, their wound inner child that had trauma, was left at home as a kid, that had the experience like me where I was called fat and ugly on the bus. That all sat in my nervous system, and that all made my body not feel safe. A lot of people don't realize when you leave your home environment, if you are associating running errands or being out or certain activities out your door with food, you're going to wire a neural pathway, which is a habit, and it's going to light up like every time you leave your house. And you're going to find yourself going through the drive-through even if you don't want to. You're going to find yourself in the justification of all or nothing while I'm out, and when I'm out I eat whatever I want. It is so much easier to make those choices than it is to actually make mindful choices when you're out.
So Amber, we were having this conversation before we got on, and your story, I think, will resonate with so many women that listen to my podcast, and maybe even some of the men. We do have some men that listen to us. But I think a lot of the times it takes a lot to notice that we have a conflicted relationship with food. So could you share your story about food, emotional eating, and how you got here?
Yeah, so it started at a very young age for me that I obviously didn't realize until I was healing, but I had really significant self-worth issues and body image issues by the time I was 5, because the first day taking the bus to school, I got on the bus and the older boys called me fat and ugly, and then the whole bus made fun of me, and that really made me take on that identity for the next 20 years of my life. I grew up, my mom had multiple sclerosis and was diagnosed before I was born. And I think a huge way for her to compensate for a lot of the things we couldn't do together because of her symptoms was with food. And there was always food, whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted it in the house. And there was no kind of like talk of eating healthier and having this stuff. Sometimes it was just I could eat whatever I wanted whenever I wanted. And then that really birthed an unconscious like sugar addiction, using food as a coping mechanism. And then in my early 20s, I had my first real breakup, was so upset I could barely eat, started losing weight really quickly, and then started adding in 2 hours of the gym every day, and lost weight really quickly. And I was so convinced by the weight loss and diet industries, once I lose weight, I'll finally be happy. Reached my goal weight, was not happier. My period disappeared because I'm like underweight, not eating enough. And then the switch like flipped to where it was, I went to my first kind of like party of the summer that year and ate one piece of ice cream cake and then wanted a second, and then ate a burger, and then stole the chocolate bar on the counter for everyone to make s'mores, and like went to the bathroom and ate it, and then left the party and got fast food on the way home and like binged until I was so full I was sick. And then this created this whole binge eating restriction, bulimia for the next 6 months where I gained 80 pounds, but I was using bulimia and purging to try and prevent weight gain. Of course, that didn't work and it just stressed my body out more. But it was a very low time because I had not ever been in that kind of a cycle before. I was unconsciously emotionally eating my whole upbringing, but it wasn't like eating until I was so full I was sick every night, and then skipping breakfast, skipping lunch, going to the gym for 2 hours trying to compensate, and or purging after a binge. And so this got full blown to the point where I was going to the organic store to try and justify why it was a healthier choice, but I was buying like $70 to $80 worth of food, like a whole table full of food, and just sitting down and eating until I was so full I was sick. And the guilt and the shame and I was just stunned. I'm like, I don't understand why I'm doing this. I don't have control. Why is this all coming up? But the shame and the embarrassment around it was so significant because now I'm the heaviest I've ever been. I don't want anyone to see me. I don't want to date. I don't want to go out and be social. I'm going to work to survive to pay my bills, but otherwise I'm staying at home. And now I'm revolving my whole world around food, asphyxiation around the number on the scale. I feel absolutely horrible. I'm so bloated. My digestion's so sensitive. I'm brain fogged. I'm just, not myself. And that went on for a couple of years really significantly, where it was just like either I was obsessing about food and my next binge, or I was obsessing about the next diet or eating style or quick fix that I was going to try and gain control with food, all while fighting with my body and myself. And I was in denial. I think that's actually something that a lot of people that I've talked to or worked with when we first started is actually a denial that it's not a big deal. And I was in this deep denial, like it's not a big deal. Food's my friend. It's there for me. It makes me feel good when I need it. But I wasn't really understanding the depth to which I was like in self-destruction mode and how much I was actually hurting my body and every aspect of my being. And, that kept it drawn out, I think, a bit longer. But then it got to the point where I'd stop purging. I'm like, if I'm going to binge, I have to take ownership and I've got to feel this and deal with the consequences of it before I knew how to deal with it, really. And then I had my low point moments when I had finally figured out I was binge eating. I'm like, this is what I'm doing. I just don't know how the heck I'm going to deal with any of it. Because when you have 80 pounds to lose, all your physical health systems are a mess. My gut, my blood sugar, everything's just a mess. My mental health is in the gutter. I am feeling so unworthy. It's like intimidating to think of, where do I even start? What do I even do? I had no health and wellness background. I went to college to be an entertainment reporter. I have no idea. Standard American diet, like that's what I grew up with, right? So it's like I have no idea about health and well-being and nutrition or anything. So it was so intimidating and daunting to think about starting to deal with it, that it just, the fear of the unknown and all of that kept me in this cycle, because it was what I knew. It was what was familiar and comfortable, even though I was suffering so much and hurting myself so much. And so I had thrown the food in the garbage one night and I was just laying on the couch crying because it was just so painful, right? Like to be so full and so uncomfortable. And again, the shame and guilt. Nobody knew. I didn't want to tell anyone. I didn't want anyone to judge me. And I'd always throw the food away because it was the motivator to not eat it anymore. It was like as if I'm going to eat out of my garbage can. I would never do that. And that particular night, of course, after the food started to settle, there would always be this voice that would come in and go, well, if this is the last time you're going to do this, you might as well eat the rest of the food. And so that night, I went into my little apartment kitchen, pulled out my blue garbage, ate the cookies, and then sat on the floor and was just shocked at what I did. I'm like, I just ate the garbage. Who have I become? Like, I don't even know who I am. This is so hellish for me. Why am I having to deal with this? Like, it was a daunting moment. And so then I took the food out into the alley and threw it in the dumpster. And then an hour later, I'm out there like digging through. Like, that's how addicted I was. I was so addicted to a lot of different foods. But I needed that to happen because it crushed the familiarity and the comfort zone that I was in. It crushed the denial that it wasn't a big deal. And it crushed the fear of change, the fear of unknown, of who would I be if I actually tried to change this. And that really catapulted me onto the healing journey, which, there was several layers to that, changing the way that I was eating. But then I wanted to binge on like a jar of organic peanut butter and 10 bananas. So it's like whole bags of cashews. I'm like, okay, it's not just about changing the way that I eat. And then I had to get really honest with myself. And I think that's a big deal with this, is getting, lovingly honest with ourselves, of like, I hated myself. I have no idea how to cope with stress. I am obviously still addicted to certain foods. I need to figure out why that is. I don't even know what's triggering me. So how am I supposed to figure this out if I don't even know why I'm triggered to go to food? And I'm afraid to feel my feelings. And so I really had to start working on those things. So I'd get triggered and then I would write down what happened and I'd try to like start to forgive myself for it and build awareness around those triggers so I could start to catch them. I started to bring in self-care practices like meditation, breath, yoga, getting outside, tapping, journaling, whatever they were, to start feeling and try to find some level of feeling grounded and calm. I started to catch negative self-talk and apologize to myself and shift it to positive. And I started to feel my emotions, which I think was a mind-blowing moment, because I call it the inner critic, the ego mind. When you have convinced yourself that feeling is going to like make the world end, you literally will do anything to avoid it. It's like, so I was like, okay, I had a trigger come up. I was feeling fear and I said 30 seconds, but 30 seconds on a timer and just sit and see what happens. And I felt for the first time in a long time. And it was such a confidence booster because nothing bad happened. And I was like, oh, I can feel it. Everything ended up being okay. And so I started feeling through my emotions. And as I went through this phase, this really mindset, emotional, mental phase of my healing, behavioral phase of my healing, I really gained so much traction forward, rather than binging, 4, 5, 6 nights a week. It was like once every other week or once a month. Um, and that really allowed me to get to the next level of healing and building my self-worth and self-love. And then after I stopped binge eating, it was like the explosion of hormone imbalances and gut issues and blood sugar and all. Oh my goodness, I was like postmenopausal at 23. Like with my progesterone, my estrogen though was through the roof. My obviously I had insulin resistance. My cortisol was 10 times higher than it should have been. Like I've still never seen anyone with that. I had my cortisol was 2,000 here in Canada. It should be like 375. Like it was, I don't know
Yeah.
how I survived through all that. And I'm so grateful my body didn't give up on me. But as I healed, those things, people were asking questions like, "What are you doing? You seem different. You're brighter. You're lighter, emotionally, blah blah blah." And I'm like, I think actually I went through this because I'm meant to help other women with it. Like, how many other women are struggling and aren't saying anything or don't know where to start or what to do? Maybe they haven't had the right experience with someone else and they just feel alone. And so that's what really inspired me to start my business 12 years ago and do this work because so many women are struggling. It's an epidemic that is not talked about enough. And it is a precursor to all kinds of other imbalances, whether they be emotional, mental, physical, energetic, like any level. And if we really want to heal these other things, we've got to heal this. Otherwise, it keeps being an issue.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I'd love to dig in a little bit and make sure, because we have a lot of preconceived notions about the definition of these things like emotional eating, anorexia, bulimia, food addiction. And I want to throw in orthorexia because that is something I see and have seen for 20 years in our clinic. And it's because, we've also made nutrition a religion, right? Especially with the influencer market, that is kind of a new thing that I think most people don't know about, but it is also in itself a form of disordered eating, So let's walk through those so people kind of understand because it's somewhat of a continuum. Yeah, not everybody falls into it, and a lot of times it's a sliding slope where you might be starting in one area and then working through it.
Oh, totally, and I went through everything except anorexia. That's the only thing I don't do because I don't have the scope, but yeah, so with that, it's like this heavy restriction and there's this body dysmorphia. You think you're so much bigger than what you actually are. And I think there's a lot of nutrient deficiencies aside from the mental, emotional, right? Like disconnect from the body that really puts us into that restrictive mode. And then when we get into the other side, which is the overconsumption, I mean, with emotional eating, I mean, any form of self sabotage with food where you're using food to cope, in my opinion, is for emotional reasons. Now, some of those triggers could be physical imbalances, but you're still being fueled to eat, to numb, shove down, avoid, procrastinate, punish yourself essentially. So any reason other than eating for physical nourishment, in my opinion, is some form of emotional eating. And there's dozens of potential triggers. And I think that's where a lot of people get stuck, man or woman, is if you don't know all your triggers, they're going to creep up on you at some point and hit you and you're going to give in again. And so getting very clear on that is very important. But it could be you have a trigger come up and you eat half a chocolate bar or a handful of crackers. Like it could be a small amount of food, but it's still you actually didn't need it. You weren't physically hungry. You didn't need to physically nourish yourself. Now, that doesn't mean you can't go out and enjoy a nice birthday dinner or a celebration or mindful indulgence, but I'm talking about something came up. I'm not physically hungry. I'm going to eat. And then it can turn into the emotional eating where you eat, to the point where you're bloated or you feel a little uncomfortable. But the other side of it will usually also trigger shame, guilt, you get hard on yourself about it. There's an emotional reaction to what you just did because there is something else behind it, or you're very asphyxiated with a number on the scale, your body image, right? Your worth has been put into that. And so, of course, you feel shame if you overconsume, even if it's just a small amount. And then where we get into binge eating is this full loss of control. So, whether it's triggered by you start eating because you get triggered, and then you go into the all or nothing mentality of like, screw it, I messed up. I'm going to eat whatever I want today, right? And then it's just a free for all for the rest of the day. I'll try again tomorrow. Or it's that you eat something that for you may be a food that is a trigger food, whether it's sugar or, like I said, for me, I went through a phase where it was nut butter. It doesn't matter like what kind of food it is. If it gives you a huge dopamine high, you can feel this huge loss of control and you want to eat it until you're so full, you're uncomfortable or you feel sick. Or the mentality could be, I need to eat it all now because I need to get it out of the house so I'm not tempted tomorrow. So there's just so many like things that push us into this extreme or this all or nothing mentality of I need to eat it until it's gone. But that addictive part of it is there's certain ingredients that are put into food that give us a huge dopamine high, which is one of your mood boosting neurotransmitters that makes you feel reward. It makes you feel pleasure, euphoria for a very short period of time. But we chase that. We get addicted to chasing that dopamine high, especially if we have low dopamine, we have hormone imbalances. Like there's all kinds of things that make it easier to want to chase that feeling, even though it's maybe lasts for 30 seconds or so. And so these kinds of things just amplify this desire to overconsume. Now, there's certain blood sugar issues, hunger hormone issues that can make it so much easier for us to have that heightened appetite level and to be able to plow through so much more food. And that's what I found is as I was deeper into this, my binges were getting bigger because my appetite was getting bigger because of all the imbalances I didn't realize I was creating because I knew nothing about well-being, my health or well-being at the time. And then what happens for women is then they're just eating until they're so full they're sick. And then some women are purging. And to me, that purge, there's a couple things with it. It is you get a dopamine high, or maybe you're using laxatives. Like I went through a phase where I was using magnesium citrate. I binge, and then I would be like, oh yeah, it's okay. I'll just take a bunch of this, and it will, leave, and I don't have to deal with it. So whether you're purging upwardly or downwardly, it is this. It's okay if I do that because I can just get rid of it. So it is we're already using this as a numbing, a coping, a shoving down of our emotions. But now I'm going to lack taking ownership and responsibility because I'm afraid or I feel insecure in my body or I don't want to gain weight. Like whatever the reasons are, feel very valid in the moment, but is a further destructive behavior than what we just did by consuming the food, in my opinion, to be then purging out either end because it's very hard on the body. But there's that lack of ownership and responsibility. If I do this, I won't gain weight, whatever the reasons are, right? But it's coming from this, we have to be empathetic and compassionate because it's coming from this place of unworthiness and insecurity. And we just want to look good so we can feel good and all these stories that we have built up over our lives. And then the food addiction to me is this full blown asphyxiation, whether you are either, it's like 99% of your mental space is consumed by thoughts of food, whether you're trying to calorie count, restrict, weigh or measure your food, get on the next diet or eating style, right? In that way to try and quote unquote gain control, and or you are asphyxiating over your next binge, right? Your next emotional eating episode, or what am I going to do to burn this off after I did that? Or what am I having for lunch? And like, it's just nonstop thinking about food, thinking about weight, the number on the scale, having that dictate how you feel in the day, right? I'm not good enough today. The number didn't drop enough. I'm not dating this week because the number's not low enough. It's just this full blown asphyxiation, and there's very little mental space left to actually enjoy going about your day because you're like white knuckling it. I was like, okay, I feel like this week I kind of have control, but I'm like I am terrified for the moment that I don't have control and I lose control with food again. There's just so much insecurity because we don't know how to deal with this. We're not equipped or taught how to overcome these things in mainstream. And so that to me is kind of the spectrum, and it looks different for everybody. But I was the full blown eating until I was so full I was sick. I had the food addiction. I would like leave parties or leave events to go to the store before it closed to get my binge food so I could get home on time. And like that lack mentality, I don't know if I have enough. If this is the last time I'm going to do it, I better get more food. I can never eat it all though. So that's some of the chatter, right, that goes on in, that you shouldn't do this. It's not a good idea. And then it's like, oh, but you had a bad day or you had a good day or what. It's just like there's both sides, and you just are so in your head. That's the thing is you're not in your heart where you truly are in your power. You're just so up in your head.
Yeah, it's so much of that, and I wanna talk about kinda 2 things. So, like I sort of mentioned it, the orthorexia. So, if you wanna see the most messed up diets on the planet, go to a nutrition program and get a master's or a health like, because a lot of times you do what you struggle, right? So the massive number of people that are in this industry that have disordered eating history and or current disordered eating, because the other thing that I saw in the last 20 years was this, I'm gonna eat healthy, right? And we all go, cool, I wanna eat healthy. But all of a sudden they're eating healthy and they keep removing foods. I can't have this food now because it has now been deemed bad by the latest influencer. I can't have this food. So all of a sudden they're down to these very few limited foods, some of which aren't good for us, right? Yes, ultra processed foods, all those things. We know those aren't good for us. But on the other side of that, this highly restrictive, now I'm not eating out, now I'm not seeing my friends because they won't accommodate my highly restrictive diet. And then the one thing that definitely happens is if they are reactive, like if the thing that drove them to restrict those foods is reactivity or underlying health concerns, the one way to guarantee that that will continue is to continue to remove food groups and foods from your diet. right? And because it starts to favor other microbiome and just so many things. But I find myself, particularly with women in the menopausal age group, I'm trying to help them embrace food, like, because they're so scared of food. Coming from the bodybuilding world, I went through that. All of a sudden, I worked with a trainer for years that I had like 10 foods that I was allowed to eat: oatmeal, dry chicken breast, eggs, protein shakes. I can tell you right now, I will rather starve than eat a protein shake because I ate them twice a day, every day for 7 years. Like, I have to like do something because I don't like the whole thing sort of it triggers me. I'm like, I'm not eating that. I'll find something else to eat. And I was like, don't put a chicken breast on my plate. I'm not eating that. I'll eat a chicken thigh.
Totally. Yeah. No, the orthorexia thing is huge. I went through that. So I was still dealing with binge eating and I was trying to heal my gut. And it was like, do this, like, don't eat fruit, just eat like protein and non starchy vegetables and have a starchy vegetable at dinner. And it triggered a huge relapse because it was unrealistic. And then it trashed my hormones more. Again, I didn't know anything about hormones yet. And you do. I stopped going out to eat. I'm like, restaurant food is bad. You don't hang out with your friends. And you're in this fear. It's such a disempowering thing. You're in such a fear state because you're like, this is all bad. I can only eat like these, yeah, 15, 10, 20 foods or less. And then you're guilting and you're shaming if you end up having those. But it just triggers huge relapses with overconsumption, binge eating, right? Losing control again. And I think too, like you said, there's so many restrictive eating protocols or elimination diets or my whoever I'm working with said if I don't cut all these foods I can't heal. And I think that's one of the most disempowering things you can share with somebody is if you don't cut out all these foods and do this properly, you're not going to heal like that, because then people feel like I'm never going to heal because I can't attain this level of perfection. And I think regardless of what the protocol is or what you're trying to do, if it's to strive for perfection doesn't exist, and it is at some point going to trigger a rebound or a boomerang or some form of rebellion and just cause more stress to the body than before, right? And you're right, you do get those foods that are like, I never want to eat that again because that just brings up all kinds of old restrictive memories. So I feel like with the influencer era and all like the FODMAP and all these things, like it just people are so afraid of food because maybe they've had a bit of relief from some symptoms, but then they're like, oh my God, I'm terrified to eat this because I don't want all my symptoms to come back. And what if I gain weight or whatever it is? And again, if we still have all that fear, we have to understand that that approach is not healing. We're not building our worth. We're not healing food fears and building our worth and learning how to trust our body and listen to our bodies and build awareness. And I think that that's incredibly important. But because the weight loss diet industry, the influencer industry they just have such a big budget. Like they're still so good at marketing to the masses because especially in North America, the masses are really struggling with weight. They're struggling with all these inflammation and hormone issues and mood issues and self-worth issues. That's not being eradicated at the root. It's just slapping on more band-aids. So it just continues to be this epidemic of disempowerment for women, especially, and for men.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's the difference. Like I explain this to people all the time in our clinic, and then with our telemedicine patients. I'm like, there can be therapeutic diets. Therapeutic diets are designed to execute a certain biochemical, physiological response in the body to treat something like FODMAPs because you have intestinal bacterial overgrowth. That is not a lifestyle diet. That's not a maintenance diet. And if somebody told you you need to be on that for a year, they don't know what they're doing. Right. And you haven't fixed the underlying problem and all you're doing is perpetuating it. And so I think it's that expansion of that. And let's face it, if you build a platform on a restrictive diet that just earned you a couple $1 million, you're not going to change it because that keeps earning you money.
Totally, and that's I think one of the biggest blocks is the money piece, and I think too like and I would love to hear your thought on this, but if you're struggling with binge and emotional eating, it's likely not the time to go on one of those. You got to heal that first. Like I just have seen so many women be told, "Oh, you need to cut these things out now and do this thing," but they're not comfortable opening up and sharing with their practitioner that they're struggling with emotional or binge eating, or maybe their practitioner doesn't know how to deal with that. And they're like, well, just have willpower and just do it because you need to do this to whatever. Right. And then it's such a embarrassing thing when you can't keep up on that protocol, but you're not actually dealing with that first root issue getting that out of the way is actually going to make whatever that protocol is a lot more effective and actually work. But it can be very triggering if it's not like it just becomes another big trigger.
Yeah, I mean, I think the inner work is equal to, if not excess of the outer
Yeah.
work, right? And I think, and it is, I think that's why I share my story. I was overweight for a long time, and, some of it was hormonal and some of it was coming off of a highly restrictive environment. Because again, I was in the bodybuilding world, and leanness at all costs was the
Right.
important part. And, those things do a number on your stress chemistry and other stuff. And so I sort of boomeranged the other direction. At the same time, I entered perimenopause, and some of it was being driven definitely by the hormones. But the other part was, I was, in my brain, I was like, oh my God, I got to double down on what I knew to do before, right?
Yeah, totally.
Work out harder, do this more. I was like, and my body also was like, don't do that anymore. You can't
Yeah,
do
oh
that
my
anymore.
gosh.
And again, because healthcare people usually struggle with whatever they work on, and if they tell you they don't, they're probably lying to
Yeah,
you. They all had
totally.
issues, right? I'm just telling you, man.
Yeah,
I I felt schizophrenic when I went to nutrition school. I was like, this person's doing that. Maybe I'm doing the wrong diet. I should do that one, because everybody had their own restrictive something or other. And yeah. And so I think that's true. The other thing I think of, particularly women in my age group and men, we didn't go out to eat very much. Like, it was a big deal. Like, we only went to a fast food joint when we were driving across the country to go visit a family member on vacation. We didn't go out to eat. And so to us, eating was entertainment. Like, it was a big deal. So it was a celebration. But in today's world, right? In today's world, we eat out or order food or something else out of convenience, but our little reptilian brain back there still says it's entertainment. You know what? And so in our brain, we're like, well, I'm going to eat this bad thing because I'm at a restaurant, right? And I'm air quoting bad, right? But I'm going to eat this thing I wouldn't normally eat because this is I'm out. But you're out 10 times a week.
totally. And I think that's the thing is a lot of people don't realize when you leave your home environment, if you are associating running errands or being out or certain, activities out your door with food, you're going to wire a neural pathway, which is a habit, and it's going to light up like every time you leave your house. And you're going to find yourself going through the drive-through, even if you don't want to. You're going to find yourself, yeah, in the justification of all or nothing while I'm out. And when I'm out, I eat whatever I want and I don't necessarily make a good choice. And if that's accumulating, like you said, 10 times a week or in a really massive fashion, it's so easy to numb our taste buds, fuel that desire for processed food, sugar cravings, carb cravings, fast food cravings, whatever it is. And we get that dopamine high. I just think that I can't hit that home enough is we want to feel good. And when you take those first few bites of food, you feel really good before all the repercussions of the after. And it's so accessible. It is so much easier to make those choices than it is to actually like make mindful choices when you're out. Like around here where I live, like it's no different in Canada. Like there's maybe 2 or 3 restaurants that we could go to that have a decent menu, right? Otherwise, everything it's just like I would rather not eat than go and get McDonald's, to be honest. Like I'm
Oh,
not going to
yeah.
eat fast food. It's just a personal choice. But it's like they make it so easy to make poor choices and feed a food addiction or feed a binge eating or emotional eating issue that then, impact your physical well-being and your emotional well-being that then push you to have to go on these, therapeutic diets or whatever, right? Like all of it, it just fuels it. And it is so different. And I think that's where they've made it so easy on the physical consumption part to fuel these kinds of behaviors because everything has some kind of addictive ingredient in it.
Oh, yeah, especially
Throws your
fast
blood,
food.
yeah, it throws your blood sugar off. It makes you want, it increases your appetite. Like it all makes you want more. And then you try to make maybe a wholesome meal at home and you're like, "Oh, this tastes like crap," because your taste buds are so numbed or it's not giving you that same dopamine high, right? So it just makes it so much easier to want to go out or your association. Like for me, it was watching TV and eating. That was
Mhm.
like my huge it took so long to break that habit because there was years of me just sitting and binging and watching TV. And same with, like I said, people that go out and run errands. And it's just everywhere. You go to the bookstore and there's a chocolate stand and like the gas stations have, right? Like coffee and donuts and just it's all everywhere. And so it's when you're in food addiction, like it was hard for a while to go out because it was so tempting. Because a huge
Mhm.
trigger is the visual. I see it, then I want it. And
Yeah.
when you're to that point where your environment is so hard to be intentional in, sometimes you're like, I just feel like it would be easier to stay home because it is everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because, the food companies know this. That's why everything's always orange and yellow and red. It's because it triggers the brain. What I think is interesting in the United States, and I don't know if you guys have, like, Chick-fil-A or Cane's Chicken. It's so funny because people will negotiate. They go, "Well, I go to the healthier fast food, Chick-fil-A." I just start laughing. I'm like, "There ain't no difference between Chick-fil-A and McDonald's." They both have massive amounts of MSG, obesogens, food additives and natural flavorings that trigger the animalistic part of your brain to go into overdrive. When you were telling your story about, going out and having sort of that route, we had a client of ours that was struggling, and she admitted one day that's like, several times a week I go out to make the rounds to my stores instead of going once and like knocking it out. It was almost intentional to spread it out over the course of the week, but there was a Chick-fil-A in the parking lot, so it's like I always go through Chick-fil-A. I always get this, and I get a coffee, or whatever it was, and she would, and some of it took a long time for her to recognize she was spreading out so she could go and do the ritual at Chick-fil-A.
Yeah, totally. And it's so interesting too with the environmental because then it's like the holidays. Like maybe people start to gain traction, and then all of a sudden it's like Thanksgiving or Halloween, or when you go to visit certain people's houses or go to certain locations, and then these pathways are lighting up because you're associating these behaviors in these environments. That was my last trigger, going home to visit my parents, because there was so many years of memory and habit of over-consuming, of hurt, of wounded inner child. So it was like every aspect of my being just wanted to numb and soothe with food. So again, like these habits are so massive. They're so multifaceted and complex. That's why it's not about willpower. It's not about you suck at your diet, you aren't doing good enough. It's like we are not taught the way the brain works with all of this, the dopamine. We're not taught about your environment and how we wire these habits and pathways that are going to light up as soon as you go into that environment or that memory or that moment, right? Yes, we can change them, but if how are you possibly supposed to change this? And then the rhetoric, for the most part, I mean, obviously there's great people like you that are understanding this, but the rhetoric is just like, have willpower, just don't eat that. Well, what's wrong? How come you can't just do this diet, just take this thing? And it's just like all of it just amplifies it even more at some point, and can make the behaviors worse, right? So we need to start really talking about how this impacts every aspect of our being, and the neurological, chemical, physical, mental, like all of it, because it is the reason it's one of the biggest epidemics and health issues in North America.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that because one of the resounding things we hear now with women in perimenopause and menopause is like, you have to do the diet and lifestyle and earn your hormones. And I'm like, that's complete and utter bullshit. I was like, we've got hormones that are massive communicators in your body, like you were talking about insulin and our sex hormones and our adrenal stress hormones. And if you don't dial some of that in and help support them, it's just going to trigger the other mental, emotional, and other things that we may not be clearly uncovering yet because we may not know. But it's just going to make it worse because the body is trying to protect you. And I think the other thing that really pisses me off is that weight, right? Body weight, either too low, too high, whatever. We don't like junk in the trunk, whatever our story is a symptom. It is not the cause.
Yeah,
It is
100%.
never the cause.
Yeah. Yeah, weight is a protective mechanism your body's hanging on because she doesn't feel safe. And so what we have to really start understanding is, what is it about? Because you could completely change the way that you eat. You could stop binge eating and still not see it shift. And it could be nothing to do with anything physical. I mean, there probably is something, but I've had women who it's their inner child, their wound inner child that had trauma, was left at home as a kid, that had the experience like me where I was called fat and ugly on the bus. That all sat in my nervous system, and that all made my body not feel safe. And so healing that part is maybe what helps some of them, but it's still, they regulate their nervous system, they feel safe, and then the body lets go. So I think really understanding that the weight is the symptom 100%, just like the bloating or the fatigue is a symptom, and that's the way the body communicates with us. But again, we've been educated, like, you get angry at your body, you self-loathe, they're like, my body's out to get me, I can't lose the weight. Like, no, she's trying to communicate, but we haven't been taught how to communicate with our bodies either. And I think that that's why starting to open up time to actually connect with ourselves, talk to your body and say, hey, how are you, do you have any messages for me today? Like, start that dialogue, because awareness is your superpower. And as you become attuned with your body, you're going to know what you need, what she needs. Like, I know exactly if my thyroid starts to creep off a bit. I know exactly if my adrenals, if my progesterone's low, like I can feel it, right? But it took years to build that attunement, but it's a superpower because you'll have it forever, and then you know what you need to give yourself, or you can get a little bit of help to sort through things. But it's not like, oh my gosh, I'm just gaining weight uncontrollably. Why? And I have no idea what to do. And the old things I'm doing are not working. And I think that's one of the biggest things you probably hear too. The stuff that I usually do isn't working, and I'm doing more of it, and it's worse. And more cardio and more exercise like is not the answer necessarily. It wasn't in my case. And it just, we have that boomerang, and then we're questioning our bodies more, and we're fighting more, and we're spiking the cortisol more. Right? And then the appetite's bigger and you want to eat more. And it just, again, we by accident fuel these opposing outcomes that we're not looking for. Because again, the weight loss diet, food industry, it's all about like willpower, control, right? Eat less, exercise more. Like it can be further from the truth, that whole
Right.
archaic message.
Right. And I'm glad you brought up exercise because a lot of people are like, well, it's great that I'm exercising. I'm like, if you're doing 2 hours of yoga a day and then doing it after dinner and also doing cardio, you are doing disordered eating in a physical response, right? Like it's all part of the restrictive thing because that's not healthy behavior. That is beating up your body for what you perceived happened because of whatever you ate.
Yeah, and there's such a fear of slowing down movement, of making time for yourself. There's so much guilt, especially for women and moms, like with, right? Oh gosh, I can't take time for myself. Like I don't want to let anyone down, and it's uncomfortable, and we make all these stories around why we can't, but it's like, how are you ever going to heal or regulate if you are so booked and so overwhelmed? And then yeah, you're tacking on an hour or two of exercise, and you're pushing your body so hard, and you didn't even have time to eat lunch, and you're, driving to do XYZ, and you've got like, I don't know, an apple in the car, which is better than nothing, but it's just like, and then you're not eating enough, and then you're wondering why your body isn't working the way you want her to. Like, we have got to reprioritize as best we can, honoring ourselves and our basic needs like hydration, sleep, eating regularly, right? Mindful movement, but rest days are okay. I gained 80 pounds after I stopped binge eating. I gained 80 pounds again because I was still doing too much movement. And I had this limiting belief. I need to exercise to lose weight and keep it off. And here I am gaining weight. So I had to crush my limiting belief because I slowed down and it fell off.
Yeah.
Right. So it just goes to show you, we shouldn't need to, like you said, use it as a punishment mechanism or a control mechanism, because that is just another form of self sabotage.
Absolutely. So I'd love for you to explain kind of how you work with people because a lot of people are in this sort of space, but I think a multi-pronged my experience in 20 years is a multi-pronged approach. We
Yeah.
have to do the inner work. But we also need to support the body's biochemistry
Yeah.
because a lot of this is happening without our own conscious control. And some
Totally.
of it is mental, emotional, and the other part is the physiology and the biology of the body.
Yeah. Yeah. So the first thing that we always do is look at, okay, we need to understand why you're triggered. What is your unique set of triggers? And so we go through kind of like a physical, mental, emotional, energetic, spiritual, environmental, chemical, like all the different potentials. And they start to build awareness around that, which is very powerful, because then they can start catching and clearing out a lot of the small triggers right away just by awareness. And then the second thing is physical versus emotional hunger. Are you actually hungry? Do you need to eat? If so, what is actually going to be in alignment for your body? And if it's emotional, what do you really need instead of food? And that's where they really start to realize how often they're eating for emotional reasons rather than physical nourishment, which again helps them build traction. We also do hormone testing at the same time and start supporting their hormones, their blood sugar, their gut in a gentle way, but they start to gain more energy. We start to regulate their hunger and their fullness, their ghrelin and leptin. And so they start being able to know what being satiated feels like when they're actually physically hungry. So many women don't get a hunger signal, and they think that, oh, I'm not hungry, I shouldn't eat. And I'm like, no, actually, we've got to wake that back
I
up.
fight that.
That is right. That is a sign that either there's something going on with your thyroid, your stomach acid, something hormonally that is not allowing everything to communicate properly. So we help wake up their hunger signal. So then they actually start eating more regularly. And we slowly work on like eating enough, because there's a big fear around that but eating enough and that they're not going to gain weight. So we do this all at whatever their pace is, whatever feels comfortable for them. And as we do that, their cravings go away, their energy balances and improves, their sleep improves, their mood gets better. See a lot of low progesterone. So we really want to work on building that up and getting inflammation out of the body, getting the adrenals supported, because if your progesterone's low, of course, as you know, it can really impact, low levels of dopamine, serotonin,
Yeah.
oxytocin, and GABA. And then what do we want to do when those are low? We want sugar, we want carbs, we want to eat or drink to get that big, high and actually feel something or feel better. And so as we do those things, it really makes a big difference with stabilizing mood, and helping women feel more connected to themselves. Because when we're out of balance with those hormones, we feel disconnect with ourselves, with others. We feel more attached to other people's opinions and validation. And so we want to people please. So we're also helping them set healthy boundaries with their schedule, saying no when it's a no, asking for help, that it's safe to ask for help. Celebrate your independence, but it's also safe to ask for help. And so as they bring some balance to their schedule, start realizing where they're leaking energy and time to mindless scrolling, technology, stuff that they don't, right? Women always say, I don't have time to take care of myself. I'm like, if you've got time to be on watching TV for 3 hours at night, be on your phone, mindlessly scrolling, right? You have time to start building a small self-care practice and expand upon it. So that is another key piece, is starting to work toward some self-care time, getting to bed earlier, tech boundaries, disconnecting at least 15 to 20 minutes before bed is a start. And as they make these changes, they start to crave their self care time. They start to crave that time for their own reflection, healing, grounding, connecting with themselves. And then these habit shifts in the beginning feel very uncomfortable, but they become a non negotiable. And then they look so forward to them, and they really aid them on their healing journey. And then once they've stopped self-sabotaging with food, then we can focus more in on like balancing their gut, or then the hormones, you see a big jump in improvement with those. Um, the worthiness piece takes the longest. So because we've been so programmed from childhood that we're not good enough, we're not worthy, it is going to take some time to build that piece, but every step you're taking on this journey is going to help you build that self-worth and self-love. And then we also work on like healing the inner child, again, apologizing and forgiving yourself for what you've been through that's made you essentially be in this fight with yourself. And okay, weight loss. Yes, we all have a natural set point. It's not that you can't lose weight and get where you want to go, but what is actually your natural set point? And instead of a weight loss journey, let's get curious. Why are you hanging on, and why does your body not feel safe? So looking at your unique set of weight loss blocks and actually healing that stuff, because a lot of it is, again, the lack of time, the people pleasing, the proving, the perfection mentalities, the wounded inner child. I'm afraid to be seen. I'm afraid to have success. What if I heal and I lose weight and I stop binge eating? Like, I am afraid to have it all. So we have to deal with those fears, right? And those
Yeah.
insecurities, or like, I'm going to lose weight and be seen. Like, I don't want the attention. So then we unconsciously put it back on. So, how do we create that success and maintain it? Because a lot of women are so used to losing weight and gaining it back, and gaining a bit of progress and then falling back. And then they just think it's going to be their cycle. So, there's a lot of subconscious reprogramming, mindset work, changing habits and patterns. But it's very liberating because there's so many positive ripple effects. Marriages are saved, and the quality of their relationships are significantly improved. They're getting raises at work. They're starting or growing businesses. They're monetarily, their abundance is expanding. Obviously, the most important thing is they have their own backs. They become their best friend, their own best friend, and they really are so attuned with themselves, and they have that for life. So I think that you really get your life back, like with you and yourself, when you decide to do the deeper work. And I just can't preach it enough, because it works, and it is so liberating to go on this journey with yourself.
Oh, I agree. Yeah, there's so many pieces there. As women, we want our independence, but that doesn't mean independently responsible for everybody and everything
Yeah.
else. It's one of my patients said one time, she's like, she was going through a loss of a husband, and her son was not well, and she had gone through her own health challenges and was very unhappy about her body. And her counselor said this, and I thought it was, what a great way. He's like, you've got a backpack. And for the last 30 to 40 years, you've been picking up every single potential tool. I got a tool. I got a tool. I got a
Yeah.
tool. And I'm jamming them in the backpack and I keep carrying the load. Someday I might use those tools, right?
Yeah.
Someday I might. And at some point, the bag gets so heavy you can't carry it.
Yeah.
And so, when we do the inner work, we let go of the bag and we start unloading the tools that no longer serve and keeping the tools that are really, really effective.
Yeah. I totally
You know,
agree.
I totally, totally agree. So I would love to share with my audience. I think you have an emotional eating and just kind of a quiz to understand where you are on this continuum. I do want to say something about this too, because I want to make sure that if somebody says they feel disconnected from this, they're like, I don't have emotional eating triggers. I don't have an issue. I remember talking to a man, right? So men especially will say, I don't emotionally eat. So my question to him is okay, you're watching a football game. What has to be present? Beer, pretzels, nacho cheese, whatever it is. And I'm like, you got emotional eating triggers. You just don't associate it with the stereotypical picture of somebody crying on the couch and eating, right? Like we all have it. We all have some connection with food, and some of it is our survival mechanism is kind of like, hey, when you get it, right? But we all have a little bit of that. And so I think this quiz can help people sort of understand where their relationship is with food.
100%. And you're right. It's not, we have to look outside of the stereotype. It's so much more than just sitting on the couch crying and eating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like that's not it. And so tell our listeners about that quiz, and we'll
Yeah.
have the link in our show notes so everybody can go to it and sort of understand, and you've got a bunch of resources after that once they
Yeah.
understand themselves.
Totally, yeah, so you'll take the quiz and it'll just give you kind of a rating of where you're at depending on how you scored. That's gonna give you more insight into, yeah, you have no issues. Oh, you have a moderate issue. Yeah, maybe you're, probably dealing with a significant amount of emotional eating. And then you're gonna get some great podcasts from my podcast that are gonna give you more awareness and insight to start to pay a little more attention to what's going on and why. You're gonna get access to a free workshop as well to start understanding emotional eating. And then, of course, along the way, there will be notes and little, like, kind of questions for reflection, journal prompts, all kinds of things to just help you start building awareness so that you can start to feel empowered that, hey, maybe I'm dealing with this. It's okay. And I want to take some steps on the journey. And it gets to be a shame free, judgment free opportunity for you to heal.
Fantastic, fantastic. Well, Amber, this has been such a great conversation. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you so much for having me.
Yes, yes. Well, thank you everybody for listening to Menopause Mastery. If you happen to be watching this on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss any next episodes. And please leave a comment because I love to read them and I love to answer. If there's something you'd like to hear, let us know. And if you happen to be listening on a podcast, please leave us a review. It really helps us actually get more listeners and help more women.